Welcome to the Devil's Digest Week 12 game preview. Arizona State back in town for their senior day as they'll be taking on Oregon State here at Sun Devil Stadium at 12:15 on Saturday. My name is Nick Borgia. Alongside me is publisher Hode Urbino. And Hode, senior days can always be a little bit tricky, a lot of emotion that can impact the game in a pretty adverse way. So do you see this being a challenge for the Sun Devils as they come into this Saturday game?
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. I think you're right. It being the last home game of the year, obviously you want to set out the seniors on a good note. You definitely always have that element of, is the emotion going to overcome the passion? I mean, there's no doubt in my mind this is going to be a game, not to use a cliche, that the players are going to leave it all on the field. But the question is, can they really channel that emotion in a positive way? So really it's more on the passion side of the ledger rather than the emotion one. I think in an ironic way, if they're actually going to show maybe a little more emotion than usual, that could actually help it, because you look at the last 2 weeks, and Arizona State has definitely been a team that has been coming out slow out of the gates, and I think it hasn't been even more apparent against Washington State last week. ASU gets outscored 28-0 in the first half, then outscores the Cougars 18-0 in the second half. So maybe having that heightened level of emotion, of sentiments around the team is something that actually can help ASU start stronger out of the gates compared to the last 2 weeks. Obviously, the big key for Arizona State is, can they sustain that level of passion, level of emotion for 4 quarters, and like you said, not to have it hurt in adverse ways by just trying to do too much, having careless penalties. So I'm really curious to see if maybe the different mindset of this team this week can actually help them begin on a stronger note and maybe lead them to victory, something that this team definitely sorely needs after the last couple of weeks.
So if we compare this ASU offense to this OSU defense, I mean, ASU just can't really catch a break. Last week facing the number 1 defense in the pack in Washington State. This week it's the number 3 defense in the Pac-12 in Oregon State. I mean, this is another unit that offensive coordinators are not ever really excited to face.
Yeah, absolutely. Giving up an average of 21.6 points, only 107 yards on the ground, 229 yards passing. So, yeah, this is definitely going to be a unit just as formidable as what Arizona State faced in Pullman last week. Now, you do go a little deeper into the numbers, and you see that there is definitely an element of bend but not break for this Oregon State defense. So maybe in some respects, ASU might have somewhat of an easier time with this unit. It's an Oregon State defense that only has 14 sacks on the year, and when you really calculate the average over 10 games, that's not a gaudy number that really jumps at you. I mean, sure, they kept games against USC and against Washington close, but they ended up losing. So it's not that it's a defense that really can be just overwhelming even against much better teams. But obviously Arizona State has its own issues on offense, and really, like as I said, played 2 completely different halves in Pullman. So you really, if you're an ASU fan, you hope you see that offense that you did see in the second half, even though it wasn't effective enough to net a win, but nonetheless did actually play better. And one thing that has been proven about this Oregon State defense is that if you do run a higher volume and number of plays, it doesn't mean that you have to run it often or pass it often, but just really keep that up-tempo scheme going. And with a quarterback like Trent Bourget, I think that definitely is possible. That is something that can really help Arizona State. So if there's any kind of momentum to build on from the second half, Washington State, again, it wasn't a clean performance by any means, even in that last 2 quarters in Pullman, but something that the Arizona State offense did at least show some life, even though it was Emory Jones at quarterback and not Trent Bourget because of the injury. But nonetheless, I think if Arizona State does really try effectively to keep this Oregon State defense on its toes again with a high volume of plays, I think that's going to be the formula for success on Saturday.
And for ASU and their defense facing off against this OSU offense, I mean, the OSU offense is more of a one-dimensional squad, really focusing on that run, not too crazy of a passing attack. And then again, like you said, ASU coming off a pretty impressive second half performance where they didn't allow any points against Washington State. Is that something the Sun Devils can try and reciprocate as they take on the Beavers on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely there's some momentum also carrying with the Arizona State defense from last week, as you mentioned, Nick. And in a way, this should be really a defensive coordinator's dream, because you have an absolute one-dimensional offense that you're facing, and an offense that really isn't interested in peppering the ball all over the field, stretching your defense time and time again, but just really pounding it on the ground. So I know that the easy solution really would be, okay, you stack line of scrimmage and you dare a quarterback, you dare a passing game for Oregon State that definitely has been average at best to really go ahead and punish you. And it really is a three-headed monster with the Oregon State ground attack. Damon Martinez is their main running back. He's healthy going into the game, but his two backups, Jam Griffin and Deshaun Fenwick, are questionable for this week. So we don't know if they're going to play, and if they are going to play, if they are going to be effective. So when you're averaging 190 yards on the ground, it's obviously a collective effort. That goes without saying. But if you're going to have the backups now really not playing at 100%, how much does that affect the whole ground game for Oregon State? I think that's something going to be interesting to see. To me, one of the biggest keys, and maybe not a lot of people are going to talk about it, is Jack Coletto. Somebody who has been absolute an Arizona State nemesis. Just look at the box scores for the last two games. Whether Arizona State wins or Arizona State loses, that guy is a thorn in Arizona State's side, and that's probably a gross understatement right there. Jack Coletto this year, I believe, has only 85 yards rushing, but 6 touchdowns. So if there's a goal line situation, if there's a short yard situation, you best believe that Jack Coletto is going to be on the field and probably is going to make a key play. So for Arizona State, it really is incumbent on them to really stop Jack Coletto from punishing them what would be a third year in a row. But really, nonetheless, I know the formula is simple. You really just stop the Oregon State running game, take your chances with the passing game. Of course, every defense in the Pac-12 tried to do this year, some with varying degree of success compared to others. But if Arizona State can really grind to a halt the rushing game for Oregon State, that is by far their best chance of winning on Saturday.
So, Hode, with no more bowl eligibility for the Sun Devils, we've heard all week from ASU players and ASU coaches how it's playing for pride and playing for the seniors. Those are the two big things that go into games like Saturday for a senior day. So, with those various aspects in mind, how do you think the Sun Devils will stack up? Can they come off of their 2-game losing skid and try and turn things around for their final home game?
Well, you did bring up a good point for Arizona State not having to play for a bowl eligibility and just playing for simple pride right now. And I would also maybe twist it and say, okay, what does Oregon State have to play for? Oregon State already has 7 wins on the year. They're out of contention for the Pac-12 championship. They already have a bowl. Right now they're just really playing. They already have bowl eligibility, and right now they're just playing for a better bowl, really. And this could be a trap game. They have Oregon next week in the Civil War. There's definitely a game that they're really chomping at the bit to play at, because they just feel that for the first time in a long time they're really on the same level of the Oregon Ducks right now. So I think this is an Oregon State team that also does not play that well on the road. Even though they won games against Fresno State, against Stanford, you can look at the tape, you can look at the box score. I mean, they definitely did not perform well away from Corvallis. So when you look at Arizona State really just playing for pride, and Oregon State really with not playing for any lofty goals out there, and again, a team that really does not play as well on the road, I think this actually could tilt the scales in Arizona State's favor. I think ASU fans personally should be much more worried about the game at Arizona next week in the Territorial Cup than they should be on Saturday. And we'll have time to talk about that when it's more appropriate. But right now, looking at the game on Saturday, I do think that Arizona State offense, if they do have an effective approach, and like I said, can keep that high volume of plays, which again with a guy like Bourget at quarterback, I really believe they can accomplish. And I think their defense, if even with a maybe potentially depleted running back unit for Oregon State, I think can really just halt that running game enough to put more pressure on the passing game for the Beavers, and that's an aspect that I don't think the Beavers can really succeed in. So I think it's going to be a close game. I think, as I mentioned in the beginning, that Arizona State is actually going to come out of the gates on a much better note, just because of that passion of senior day, also homecoming, by the way, and really really play well from the get-go. I think that all that is going to be keys that are going to be in Arizona State's favor. So actually, I do see the Sun Devils in their last game at Sun Devil Stadium in 2022 winning 30-27.
30-27. Alrighty, Hode. Well, thank you so much, as always, for all your pregame, in-game, and post-game coverage. Keep it locked in at DevilsDigest.com. Also, drop a follow on Twitter at DevilsDigest. For Hode Urbino and the rest of Devil's Digest, my name is Nick Borgia. We thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you Saturday.